sometimes you just realise it is time for a law to be updated. The law that governs the use of vehicles, particularly with regard to headlamps in the UK, was first drafted in 1989. That is almost a quarter of a century ago. One of the biggest limitations that we have is that law specifically mentions filament bulbs. With the advent of LEDs and high intensity discharge xenon lights, we have to ask the question, are these new types of light legal? Can we convert our old halogen bulbs into some of these newer types without falling foul of the law? A few people have asked about this in various situations. They've either thought of just buying some LED bulbs and putting those in their car. Others have wanted to buy the HID bulb mechanisms and put that inside their headlamp assembly. And other people wanted to buy complete aftermarket upgraded units. And as with anything relating to the law, it's complex and there's a lot of potential grey areas. Because we live in the UK, we're going to look at the UK's laws on headlights. And a lot of drivers have been complaining recently that they're being blinded at night. About 85% of drivers say that the oncoming lights are often far too bright. So it really would indicate it's time to review this legislation. Our current legislation and testing situation is not dealing with the problem it was intended to, and that's to avoid blinding drivers when they meet these oncoming lights. I remember back in the 1980s, I was able to fit pretty much anything. Around about 1986, we started to get specific legislation on the wattage of bulbs that we could fit to our cars. I remember driving around, I think it was 120 watts in my 1982 Vauxhall Nova, and it was incredibly bright. Interestingly, the bulbs didn't last very long. I tended to have to replace them every 3 to 6 months, which actually proved to be quite expensive. But after 1986, there was severe limitations put in place to restrict the power output of bulbs fitted to our cars. The problem is that modern bulbs are much more efficient at converting that power into light. They're not producing as much heat as those original bulbs did. And we're in a situation now where most of the electrical power going into the headlight is emitted as light, which is great. It's nice and efficient, but they are substantially brighter than those original headlight units that we used to have on cars way back in the 80s and 90s. The road vehicle lighting regulations of 1989 specifically mention filament bulbs. Does that mean that all HID, Xenon LED bulbs are illegal? We know that a lot of modern cars are sold with these bulbs, and the loophole that is used is an EU directive. Any headlamp unit has to meet the ECE Regulation 98. And to get that, the HID headlamp unit needs to be tested and certified in a lab. We've also got ECE Regulation 48, and that deals with lighting installed on the vehicle. There's two aspects to the testing. Straight away, we see that we can't just buy a bulb and stick it in a headlamp assembly. The headlamp assembly essentially has the front lens, which filters the light and creates a beam pattern. It has the bulb or the light source, and it has a reflector. All of those depend on a very specific light output from the bulb. And if you change from a filament bulb to any other type of bulb, that is going to affect the light beam output. Now, it is theoretically possible that some of these bulbs will match the original specification, but in the event of HID lights, that's extremely unlikely. The light is created in such a different way, you are going to get a different pattern of light coming out of it, and that's going to cause problems. You're going to have too much light in some parts of the reflector and the headlamp assembly and too little light in others. This leaves the only way to fit HID bulbs to our car is to buy a complete headlamp assembly that has been type approved. We've got a grey area where cars have been imported into this country and they don't meet the EU regulations, or they haven't got the EU regulation stamp on it or any kind of British approval. Technically, they're illegal. They need to be changed and updated. Although some of those, in fairness, will meet the specifications and the standards. If we've got a used vehicle, we would technically need to get everything tested and approved, because this approval process is really exclusive to new cars and manufacturers, which raises a question on people selling aftermarket bulb upgrades or headlamp upgrades. Technically then, if you buy a headlamp unit, it needs to meet the EU approvals. When it's fitted to the car, it needs to meet ECE regulation 48 and comply with that in terms of the beam pattern and the light output. And it must also conform with the road and vehicle licensing regulations as far as use is concerned. The manufacturer of these headlamp units really has the onus or the responsibility to get it tested and approved. Once it's fitted to the vehicle, you also need to make sure you have some kind of self-leveling mechanism. When you go over hills and bumps and round corners, the beam pattern potentially is going to blind other drivers, which is why we need this self-leveling system in the car. A few high-end cars already have this self-leveling suspension, and in many cases that is sufficient. The car must also have a headlamp cleaning mechanism. Now, not all original cars have the headlamp cleaning mechanisms on, which would be another upgrade as well as the headlamp unit that we need to fit. According to government regulations then, just changing the bulb is not legal. Changing the bulb and headlamp unit is legal, providing it conforms to the current standards of construction and use. There have been a few amendments to the road vehicle lighting regulations in the UK over the years, but due to this problem of high intensity discharge lights, xenon lights, laser headlights, it's time really to review this legislation, and a consultation is currently underway. Please let me know in the comments what you think about the problem of ultra bright headlights. Do you think we require legislation? Do you feel that drivers should be able to fit anything they want to their cars? I hope you found this video useful. Please boot the like button. That really does help us to get out there. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. That also helps us out. And I've lined this video and this playlist up for you that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in these next videos.